The Interfaith Forum of South Africa's three-day conference comes to an end today. The TIFSA came together to call for solutions to South Africa's current challenges. Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana is currently delivering his closing address. Let's now take you there live.
Enunciation of these earlier small nationalisms make easier the creation of a political community. This question has yet to find a comfortable answer. Noluchungu poses an even more exposing question. He says, might the old nationalisms yet continue an ambiguous existence alongside others yet to be acknowledged or proclaimed in a multinational or plural state, as some clearly hope post-apartheid South Africa will be? There's little doubt today that our old nationalisms have survived, and the new nation in our South African nest has not really taken off. The old nationalisms continue an ambiguous existence in a multinational, plural state in the post-apartheid South Africa. There are some amongst us who are nationally Xhosa as a primary identity, but just happen to be in South Africa, but with not as much an emotional identity with South Africa as they have with being Xhosa, Afrikaner, Zulu, or Pedi. This also easily becomes their political identity. Indeed, the political fishing pond of the Freedom Front Plus is primarily the Afrikaner population of South Africa. And they must identify more with that nationalism ahead of identifying with a common South Africanness with other citizens. Likewise, the IFP and the NFP primarily fish from the political fishing pond of the Zulu-speaking South Africans, and who must primarily see themselves as Zulu first in the Zulu nationalism before the South Africanness with everyone else. This makes it difficult to fully identify as one people with other South African citizens. To this, Noluchungu remarks, in attempting to divest themselves of the mental and emotional residues of these encumbrances, their own past, in which are rooted their political identities, act as a powerful constraint. Therefore, old nationalisms go below the surface and become what Noluchungu anticipated would become, and I quote him again, sub-nationalisms of the kind envisaged under the policy of separate development. The sub-nationalisms that Noluchungu said would remain with us to extend the reality of separate development have indeed materialized through the provinces which are in a way like glorified Bandustans. As I say, you wouldn't have a premier of Northwest who's not Tswana. Nor would you have a premier of KwaZulu-Natal who's not Zulu. The website of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture says, nation building is the process whereby a society of people with diverse origins, histories, languages, cultures, and religions come together within the boundaries of a sovereign state, with a unified constitutional and legal dispensation, a national public education, an integrated national economy, shared symbols and values as equals to work towards eradicating the divisions of the injustices of the past, to foster unity, promote a countrywide conscious sense of being proudly South African, committed to the country and open to the continent and the world. This definition of nation building is not fulfilled. It makes claims that are not yet our reality. We do not have a unified constitutional and legal dispensation because the systems of law are not the same between the rural areas with tribal court systems and the urban populations. We do not have an integrated national economy, which is why we talk of an alternative economic architecture that must address the poverty and inequality. I assert this morning that the issues we have discussed here this week of a capable state, an economic inclusion, are not possible without a commitment to the psychology of South Africa as a national state with one South Africanness and the values we all uphold as the center of our identity, for which we shall advocate and socialize. For now, our diverse small nationalisms demand that we place loyalty and legitimacy in the centers of those nationalisms. Most members of the Freedom Front Plus would place their sense of legitimacy and loyalty in African nationalism. We might say the same for most members of the IFP, where Zuluness may be the center of loyalty and legitimacy. In an essay on nation-state, British author Anthony Peake writes, "There is a point in the history of each nation-state, in each nation-state, where the national sense becomes sufficiently strong to demand that legitimacy be transferred from the external authority to the nation." And by the external authority, I refer to the little nationalisms that we all harbor. And he continues, in a nation state, that nationality is the source of legitimacy in its political system. Peake identifies various forms of states based on where loyalties are vested: the personal state, in which the primary loyalty was to a person, a king, or a tribal state with loyalty to a tribal authority. When there is the theocratic state, where loyalty is the rule of God through religious leaders. The nation state is where the primary loyalty is to the nation, not to a person, not to a tribal council. Now, writes Peake, to achieve this, there has to be a nationality that is a sense of unique national self-awareness, and that nationality has to be asserted. Now, if you read more of that Noluchungu write-up of 1992, it's funny when he refers to the Afrikaner tribe and all these other white tribes. When nationality is asserted, then there is common loyalty to the nation rather than loyalty to and legitimacy vesting in the separate identities that deny our common nationhood. Allow me to illustrate my point by reference to an episode that we all would like to forget. The horrific episode of July 2021 that shocked many South Africans into denial. This is not us. This is not South African. The reality was that this was us. This was the ugly South Africa that we had become. It still is our identity, as not much has changed in the factors that occasioned that episode. Yet it can be changed if we put our minds to it and embrace a different sense of self and infuse positive public values and societal accountability. The soul of the South African society could be built from the ashes of shame that we had witnessed. It is up to us, our country, our responsibility. It will take some doing, and I hope the people in this room would be up to the task. Following that shameful July 2 years ago, President Ramaphosa appointed an expert panel into the July 2021 unrest. We have been blessed to have two of those experts in the room in the last couple of days. It was chaired by Professor Sandy Africa, who was here yesterday. There may be somebody else in the room. But they produced a 154-page report. And the panel made some interesting observations that speak to the three themes of our three-day convening. For day one, the makings of a capable state, the report offered these three observations. It said, the need to stop corruption in government and start addressing the needs of the people kept being kicked down the road like the proverbial can. Secondly, they say, there are other manifestations of a culture of lawlessness in South Africa. The destruction of infrastructure, theft of steel, copper, and railways, which was brought into the public spotlight and has been happening to a greater or lesser extent over a long period now. The pilfering of fuel from the strategic supply lines, invasion of disused mines by illicit artisanal miners, zamazamas, the periodic blockading of national roads by disgruntled truck drivers, the illegal occupation of buildings by bullying municipal officials, or in some cases, collusion with them by business forums, undermining procurement procedures. These are all indications of how the authority of the state has been eroded without any visible plan to respond. This comes from the expert panel. Thirdly, they say, realizing this apparent incapacity of the state to deal with these challenges, many middle-class South Africans have resorted to hiring private security companies to guard their homes and businesses. Private security companies are also relied upon by government to protect government buildings and infrastructure, as it does not have sufficient personnel in the police service to address all its physical security needs. Now, addressing us at the beginning of this week, Ambassador Monica Juma warned that South Africa is grappling with a growing gap between aspirations and material reality of three fundamental elements that secure the prosperity of any nation. And she said, first one is governance, which speaks to the capability of the state governing infrastructure and ecosystem. Two, human development. Aspirations, interests of society embodying the material conditions of the people. C, security, defined broadly to encompass the totality of the enabling environment for the fulfillment of the aspirations of each citizen, culminating in the delivery of the welfare of the people and the well-being of the nation. And she said that this growing gap of aspirations of the people and the material, between the aspirations of the people and the material reality of these areas of governance, human development, and security, has generated a litany of concerns. And this list is similar to the one raised by the expert panel looking into the July 2021 unrest. Growing violent crime, rampant corruption, gender-based violence at an unprecedented level, failure of service delivery, lawlessness, mistrust of leadership, and impunity that prevails across society in both the public and private sector. And this is a Kenyan saying this. Dr. Juma drew the connecting line between a capable state, national interests, and security. For, as she put it, only capable states can help to define and clarify national interests and can secure those through the provision of an environment that enables their pursuit at individual and societal levels, and that guarantees their protection. Now, the Juma link between a capable state, national interest, and security is exactly what makes the expert panel report into the July 2021 unrest relevant for us in this conference. The first thing we may wish to do is to press for the full implementation of the Zondo Commission report and 3 security inquiry reports along with it. The first one is the Mufamadi Review Panel Report on State Security Agency. It has to be implemented to its fullest. The second is the panel of experts report on policing and crowd management established by the Minister of Police in terms of the recommendations of the Marikana Commission of Inquiry. The third is the Sunday Africa report of the expert panel into the July 2021 unrest. If nothing else, those 4 must be implemented. This, we believe, will go a long way to connecting the dots between a capable state, national interests, and security. But Dr. Juma further argues that the combination of ensuring a capable state as well as the protection of the national interests and also guarantee national security depends on the state's ability to generate resources and apply them effectively. This is the area of economic performance and the revenue generation through the tax system, and therefore the institutional capacity of the state to plug corruption and stem illicit financial flows. Above all of this, Dr. Juma adds to the package of solutions she has for us, and I quote, addressing challenges of exclusion, rising inequality, and accountability of leaders at all levels. And this is what we must be able to say we can ensure, and that is one of Dr. Monica Juma's remedies. However, a capable state requires engaged citizens with the values of mutual respect. Responsible citizens must make for a capable state that will not undermine the rights, should not undermine the rights of other people. They will not at will and with impunity choose to occasion public disorder, which is what we do a lot in this country. A capable state requires caring citizens. When a woman kills her children and then herself, the question should not only be to the organs of state, but also to the community in the midst of which the woman lives, the neighbors, the family, the extended family. And finally, a capable state needs responsible citizenry, making appropriate inputs in their community's integrated development plan, and monitoring the performance of their municipalities and relating closely with the constituency offices of their parliamentary representatives. If all of us coming out of here, we can go back and say, in where I live, I will monitor the IDP. It will make a difference. Back to the 2021 expert panel report. The next two observations that the panel made relate to the business of our day two, an alternative economic architecture for the excluded majority. Government should pay close attention to the issues of poverty, underdevelopment, and inequality. While we accept that the issues are top of mind, there does not seem to exist a clear plan with budgets and a timetable to effectively address this matter, says the panel. It goes on and says, investments in development at the local level are therefore vital and in the spirit of distributed intergovernmental power. We urge you, Mr. President, to facilitate conditions and pathways for vibrant conditions for development at the level of local government. And they continue. In the words of one of the leaders of the faith-based organizations whom we met, I promise you it was not me. They never met me. It is time for South Africans to accept that those who have must share with those who do not. It is that simple, really. This is where Dr. Moliko's new wine strategic interventions come in. Industrialization as a key growth driver, institutions and macro. You remember those 7 things that she said. I won't read them all. The highly commercial Tsendane Mpashe agriculture project comes into the third of the Moleko proposed interventions, domestic food production and rural development. The Tsendane model is a winner in part because it has the 15,000-ton storage facility enabling the farmers to hold their produce and sell when the price is good. Using the SAFEX and the Chicago Securities Market pricing, where just this week, the price I checked it last night, the price of yellow maize is at 3,865 rand per ton. As this average yield per hectare is 5 tons, this would mean a harvest of just under 20,000 per hectare. The silo storage also provides bankable value for their produce against which they can raise capital with the bank. A byproduct of the maize and soya production is a feed lot that takes 600 cattle at a time, supplying Beef Master as a livestock market. This is a model that can be replicated for rural areas across the country. Now the point here is that our gathering must be inspired to look at options that we each can drive from the corners of our influence. One of the breakaway facilitators yesterday shared the Japanese manufacturing model where family units have the opportunity to participate in the car manufacturing by making or units or assembling various parts of the car. Now, as a local priest in Utrecht many years ago, I once approached the Volkswagen assembly plant to ask if they could let small groups in the township of unemployed people to assemble units that did not have to be assembled at the factory. The factory agreed to give us door locks, but this was torpedoed by the trade union leaders who opposed it as outsourcing, while it was an effort to share the pie with others who are also in need. This we can do today. Likewise, groups of people, youth, women, can bring back the textile industry by being contracted to supply uniforms to manufacturing industry, mining, prisons, and everywhere where the cloth can produce a work garment. Now, much has been said about youth unemployment. What stands in the way of a drive for a Marshall Plan for youth livelihoods that says in the next 3 to 5 years, we shall absorb 4 million young people, using a multiplicity of entry points? Likewise, a Marshall Plan for women livelihoods. Now, for a start, the South African Council of Churches will be approaching SAWID to partner on the case of women livelihoods, and likewise will request the youth in this group, those that were talking to us yesterday, to work with us to drive the prospect of a plan for youth livelihoods. This is to use every platform we can to include the excluded majority and eliminate poverty and reduce inequality. This is essential for a healthy nation state. The young people have reminded us to focus our efforts on the impacts of climate change. That too has economic opportunities. And now back to the expert panel report again. The next 4 observations relate to the business of this, our third day, the makings of a common nation with commitments of public values. The report says, I hope one of the authors of this report is not going to scream at me for abusing their report like this. The report says the responses to the violence in some communities exposed deep-seated racial prejudices and tensions, indicating that there is much to be done to achieve racial justice and greater social cohesion. Next, it says social cohesion and support programs, including solidarity networks that bridge the racial and class divides in society, must be supported by all social partners to ensure that there is accountability, restorative justice, and compensation of those who have suffered harm through the violence. And lastly, they say, thirdly, they say, vigilantism was one of the features of the chaos. The situation in Phoenix, Durban, took a terrible turn when self-styled community patrols harassed, victimized, and in 36 known cases, took the law into their own hands and killed innocent African people from neighboring townships, apparently in retaliation for the looting. Now, I want to testify here that the pain of Phoenix was ameliorated by the Interfaith partnership of Hindu priests at Phoenix with the Inanda Local Ecumenical Action Network of the KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council. We worked together on this. We put it through. The Phoenix pain is a clear manifestation of loyalty and legitimacy vesting in the Indian subnationalism. A boy from Guamashu who had an Indian friend with whom he often stayed for weekends when they work on their common passion in the arts, took his brother with him to go to his usual Phoenix home, and they got accosted by these Phoenix vigilantes. And they were killed because they were different and didn't fit the racial loyalty and legitimacy of the presumed subnationalism for Phoenix. The last relevant observation of the expert panel report says, a final suggestion we want to make relates to reimagining the social compact and giving dignity to all. It cannot be that almost 3 decades into our democracy, there is still such deep racialized poverty and inequality in our society. Without an end to or a reversal of these conditions, listen to this, we will only see greater insecurity, which will require more diversion of resources to security. Now, we designed this convening such that we can together identify solutions in the making of a capable state, solutions to deal with the poverty of the excluded majority, but above all, to find common cause towards a common South Africanness, with you identifying the public values that should define our South Africanness, so that we can learn to say to a practitioner of corruption, hey, wena Malusi, what you are doing is un-South African. This is not done in South Africa, so that we can say to a drug dealer, to a fraudster, to a sex pest, to a bully, and so on, the same things. with values of integrity, hard work, respect for human person. Somebody was asking me to stop working at the corner yesterday, and I said, you know what? I was brought up by parents who said, if they saw you playing, they said, you're missing something to do. You must always work. Hard work, respect for the human person, beginning with yourself, such that there be things you will not do or say because of self-respect and the respect for the next person. Honor, respect, and protect the stranger and the sojourner in your neighborhood. These and similar values be those that we should like to identify to define the character of the South African person, and for which we should educate through our public broadcaster, our initiation schools, our religious education and formation, and our school system. If we have done anything in this convening this week, it will be to urge you to recognize the relationship between the capable state, an inclusive economy that denies abandoning people in abject poverty, and the common national one identity, South Africa. The poverty of the majority of South Africans that are excluded is no accident of history. It was a design that must be undone by embracing a common South Africanness and accepting the trade-offs necessary for a common nationhood. You will have to say what those trade-offs are. This is to persuade through conscientization and the build-up of different mental models of nationhood for people to embrace the common identity while retaining the dignity of their cultural and ethnic identity. This will reduce the loyalty demands of subnational ghetto and their politics in favor of national celebration in the national politics where the nation state is our joint heritage. Let us uphold the unique value of the Hindu, the Afrikaner and the Tswana, the Khoi and the San, the Italian and the Tsonga, the Tamil and the Zulu. Let them be beautiful adornments in the tapestry of the South African nation. And let us together share in the economy and together uphold the capable state that serves our collective interests rather than the current political pursuits for sectional interests. Let us cultivate the mindset for this. Now, Dr. Monica Juma refers to this mental, emotional appropriation of the national identity as a national psychological infrastructure. She says, a critical component to this process is the reawakening of psychological infrastructure of our countries, not just here in South Africa, but across Africa. What we're witnessing lately in most African countries is the absence of an appropriate national psychological infrastructure. This is a mental orientation of citizens towards a collective, appropriate national identity that strongly influences the choices and actions of leaders and citizens. For blacks, by which was meant the so-called Africans, Indians, and so-called Coloureds, Steve Biko referred to this as black consciousness and said that in time, when black and white are at ease with the equal worth of their humanity, this black consciousness must become national consciousness for all in what he called through integration. And so, he must then have the last word. We have set out on a quest for true humanity. And somewhere on the distant horizon, we can see the glittering prize. Let us march forth. With courage and determination, drawing strength from our common plight and our siblinghood collectively. In time, we shall be in a position to bestow upon South Africa the greatest gift possible, a more human face. Thank you.
Well, that is the closing remarks there from Bishop Mpumlwana as they are closing off this session, a 3-day session of the Interfaith Forum of South Africa, looking at the various issues that the country is currently facing, and also reference being made to the July unrest report. Remember that report that was commissioned by the president of the country, and some of the recommendations that have come out of that, and also looking at the recommendations of the Farlam Commission of Inquiry that looked into the Marikana massacre. Almost sounded like it is a State of the Nation address, wouldn't you say that? But what are some of your takeaways from what the bishop had to say there?